Hey everybody. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a sped up video recording of myself modeling a F104 jet starfighter. That's a jet that was flying for the United States Air Force back in the 1950s and 60s. And it's just a very cool looking jet. It looks like a spaceship. It's probably why they call it a starfighter. So I thought it'd be fun to show you some basic modeling using this. So what I've done here is I've stretched out a cylinder and cut it off at the end, and then took a cone and stretched it out and put it on the end to create the nose cone. And then I just copied the sphere, cloned it, moved it over to the right, cut off the end of it, and now I'm lining it up to create the air intake manifolds for the jet engine. So I just cloned it, and now I'm trying to align it to make it look exactly the same on the right side to the left. And by taking this cube and turning it clear, that creates a negative space, and when I group it, it does what's called a subtraction, and it subtracts any geometry that intersects into that clear space. That's often called a Boolean. So now I'm basically taken a sphere, and I've just duplicated it, and I think what I'm doing is I'm creating the canopy for the cockpit of the jet fighter. So I just cut it in half so I can get this elongated, kind of like an egg shape. And I just attached another sphere, brought in another sphere, and now I'm just aligning it to kind of get that shape. Now I'm not doing this from memory. On my other monitor, I've actually found pictures of F-104 starfighters on the internet, and I highly recommend that you always get some kind of picture reference for whatever you're modeling. It just makes a huge difference. It helps you with just the smallest details, and it's easy to do with the internet and Google. I mean, there's tons and tons of photos of virtually everything. So there's really no excuse not to have decent reference. And I have it right here on the side on my other monitor, and I'm just constantly looking at it. And I look at other pictures that have pictures of whatever I'm modeling from different angles, and just really makes a difference. So now I just use the align tool to basically get the cockpit shape that I created aligned with the main fuselage of the jet fighter. Now I'm just kind of stretching it, feeling it out, trying to keep, and then going back and realigning it. And one of the things I do constantly, and other modelers do the same thing when you're making something, is you're always constantly rotating around, looking around the shape of your model, kind of adjusting it, seeing if you need to make a change here, make a change there. Because if you model from one view, you're going to miss out on a lot of things. You constantly need to be adjusting and looking around the model, rotating it around, looking at it from the top, the side, the bottom, and making adjustments based off that. So right now I'm just tried to make a wing, and I didn't like that, so I basically took a sphere, cut it in half. Actually, it was a parabola, and flattened it down, and then cut off the edge of it using another cube. And now I'm just adjusting where the intake manifolds are and where the wing is. So I'm constantly adjusting and looking at the model and then looking at the photo reference. And now I'm just aligning things and adjusting. The wings are too thick, making adjustments there. So I just deleted the other wing because I want it to be an exact mirror of this wing. So I just tilted the wing because the StarFighter's wing is at an angle, and I'll probably end up mirroring that later on. And just so you know, I do not model this quickly. This is sped up 700 times. And it looks amazing when you speed it up like this. I wish I could model this quickly, but reality is it's much slower than this. I didn't like something, so I just went undo, 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 undo. So now I'm basically creating a cutout. So I've taken this model that has very curved edges and I just created this cutout for the back end of the StarFighter. Now I'm making the tail fin. And that's the cool thing about these shapes. You can stretch them, you can flatten them, you can enlarge them and scale them up, and then use other pieces of geometry to make a cutout. And really only your imagination is your limit. If you look at most things in the world, they're made out and trying to get the right angle for the tail fin. Scaling this up. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's the great thing about modeling on a computer, is that you have the ability to undo. Control Z or use the undo button at the top, and it's just it's amazing. You know, you can really experiment and, like, you know what, this isn't working, and you can go back. That's very difficult to do in real life. You usually have to start over, and that just, I think, can allow you to be very to take chances, do experiments, save something, try something, doesn't work, you can either go back with the undos, or you can just open up the previous version before you went down that direction. That's the whole idea behind, to me, about life in general, is, you know, sometimes you got to take chances. That's the fun part. Be afraid to do that. No, see, now I'm just cloned the intake manifolds, and I've shrunk them, scaled them down, and flattened them out a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm going to create a cutout. So I'm just trying to line them up perfectly as much as possible to create this cutout. Now, if you're not familiar with how jet engines work, the air intake there in the front that I just created, that's that basically scoops up air and it thrusts it into the jet engine where it's ignited and creates thrust out the back. So basically jets are air breathing engines. It's pretty cool. But without air they wouldn't work. And now I'm creating a cone shape to mimic the I believe it's a cone. It's basically a cone shape on the side of the fuselage, and it essentially helps ram the air into the engine. And it's just a very cool looking shape. Kind of makes the jet look a little faster. Whether it makes it faster, I don't know. But so I just cloned it and I moved it over to the other side. And now I'm just checking out, how does that look? Well, it looks pretty cool. And I just cloned the wing, mirrored it. And another thing to remember when we're doing 3D shapes is sometimes when you're modeling, you will have already made something that's pretty close to another shape that you're going to need later on. So like the wing, I took it and I cloned it and I moved it over there, and now I'm creating the part of the rear tail just by stretching and adjusting it. That saves a lot of time instead of having to do it again from scratch. So nothing wrong with doing little, reusing stuff. Especially if you ever end up doing this kind of work as a job. Finding shortcuts to speed up your workflow, as we call it, and what I do, is absolute necessity. So I just cloned it again, mirrored it. And as you can see, sometimes I don't like something, I redo it, do it again. I'm looking, not liking the way something looks or the scale of it, so I delete it and I do it again. That's just all part of it. It's like making a drawing. You're not quite liking it, you erase part of it, or you draw over it. And it's always constantly looking and adjusting. Here I'm making the basically these are the fuel spare fuel tanks that the F104 has on the end of its wings for whenever it has to fly an extreme distance. So they mount them right on the edge of the wing, and they look like rockets, but they're essentially I believe they're fuel tanks, spare fuel tanks, and they can drop them if they don't need them later on. And now I just made a copy of that tail fin and using it to create those little tail fins on the edge of these. So here's the finished model fuel tanks. And you can see it's missing some stuff. This one I've prepped to be able to take over to be 3D printed. And 3D printing can be very finicky, so it's very selective about thicknesses of things. So I got rid of some of the finer detail so that it would pass the 3D printing stage. So I brought it in, it passed the initial stages, and I set up the material. And there you go, it's ready to 3D print. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe.